I used to think success sounded like the ping of a Slack message, quick, bright, regular as a heartbeat. That sound used to mean Natalie would look up from her laptop and grin like she'd just been handed a secret. Lately, the pings felt like mosquito whines. She got good at swatting me away without touching me at all. I'm 33. My name's Ethan. I keep networks from catching fire at a data center south of Seattle, nights mostly. The hum of cooling towers is my white noise. Fluorescent lights are my sunrise. There's a punchline somewhere in the fact that I guard other people's clouds while my own life fogged over without me noticing. Natalie and I met at a mutual friend's trivia night when she corrected the host on the difference between Holland and the Netherlands with the kind of precision you only learn from not wanting to be wrong twice. She was loud in a good way, hands, eyebrows, using the word bananas like a punctuation mark. She did product marketing for a fintech startup downtown that promised to democratize lending, which was the first time I realized you could make lending sound like a charity bake sale. She wore boots that could kill a bug at 20 paces and always had a fold of fancy paper towels in her bag for mysterious emergencies. I liked how prepared she was, like she could fix anything even if it wasn't broken. We got married in a refurbished factory with Edison bulbs and a bar list that made my uncles pronounce mezcal like it had a Z they could chew. Our first apartment smelled like paint and basil because she insisted we could keep a plant alive if we just believe. The basil lasted 3 weeks. We lasted 6 years past that basil and bought a small house in Beacon Hill with a yard where the soil turned to clay about an inch down and a plum tree that dropped fruit like little purple grenades every August. Life was not a montage. It was laundry and streaming services and the long, slow miracle of someone making coffee for you at 5 in the morning because your shift started at 6. If I had to pinpoint when my stomach started living outside my body, it would be the day the company announced an official mentorship program. She came home with a canvas tote full of branded notebooks and a lanyard that said, "Sponsored Talent" in block letters big enough to read from space. "This is it," she said, spreading the notebooks across our kitchen table like tarot cards. "This is how I get out of being the person who makes slide decks for other people's ideas." "I like your decks," I said. "Your decks make men look smarter than they are." She laughed, full and bright. "Exactly. Imagine what would happen if someone made a deck for me." On the screen behind her shoulder, a green dot blinked next to a name. Gavin, PRC. "Who's Gavin?" I asked, because his name popped up in her sentences 3 times that week. He was VP of Growth, which sounded like something a dermatologist should remove. According to Natalie, he'd been there since Series A, helped open our London office, did the panel at Money 2020, and rescued a product launch that should have sunk us. He was the kind of guy who could quote Porter's 5 forces and make you think he invented number 5. He also, she said, used to be a drummer, which was stuck in the middle of her list of facts like a rose in a report about concrete. "What's he like?" I asked. I meant, what kind of person is he? She heard, "What kind of man is he?" "He listens," she said, and that word landed between us like a glass of water in a drought. Mentorship started like a new gym routine. Calendar holds labeled 1001, a Slack channel named EgroNat, a flurry of articles about OKRs and executive presence. He gave her homework, which she did with the momentum of someone who couldn't believe they'd been given keys to a locked room. They had standing Wednesday coffees at 10. Then those coffees started running into lunch. Then lunch started running into a quick debrief on the deck. Then there were late calls with Tokyo, which might have been true, the sun never set on their user base or on my discomfort. I don't like being the guy who says, "My wife started dressing different," but my wife started dressing different. She tried on a new version of herself like it was tailored. The sneakers gave way to sling-back heels, the plaid shirts to silk blouses that whispered when she moved, the ponytail to that particular blowout that looks like someone taught your hair how to curve. I joked, not to be clever, but because jokes were our safety net. "Is there a dress code for Talent?" She kissed my cheek and said, "Executive presence, babe." Her phone buzzed. She didn't check it around me anymore. Executive absence. I tried to be the husband who didn't clutch at someone's ankle when they were trying to climb. We built a life where "go do the thing" was a love language. I knew how often her ambition got mislabeled as too much by men whose ambition was just enough. I wanted to be the not that man. But there are some patterns even the not that man recognizes. The way she started leaving early for gym plus office. The new lipstick that found its way into every coat pocket she owned. The fact that the first 3 times I offered to meet Gavin, "Invite him to dinner, I'll grill," she deflected like I'd asked to come to her pap smear. "It's just weird," she said. "He's my mentor, not my buddy." I told myself it wasn't a triangle, it was a ladder. I told myself Gavin probably mentored 5 Natalies a quarter. I told myself I was a mechanic in the engine room of the internet, and people like him thought Wi-Fi worked because of vibes. I kept telling myself things until the words got tired and just lay there on the couch while the dog licked them, and I watched another YouTube video about smoking brisket at 225 degrees because at least smoke obeys rules if you learn them. You learn strange details when someone you love swaps universes while you're still in the old one. I learned that brown liquor on the rocks is more credible than a gin and tonic if you don't want to get talked over. I learned the phrase managing up, which sounded like mopping the ceiling. I learned that offsites were a chance to build trust in an environment not dominated by keyboards, which is corporate for expensed drinks. She started saying bandwidth to describe time. She started saying partner with to describe asking a person to do the thing they're paid to do. She stopped saying we unless it referred to her team. The first real fight we had about it started because she took a shower before she hugged me hello. It was the first warm weekend in March. I'd been trimming our plum tree in a t-shirt and the sap made my hands smell like green apples. She came home after 9. The dog went wild. I leaned in and she slid past me with a bright, distracted smile. "Give me a sec, I'm gross!" She smelled like wood smoke and someone else's cologne, the expensive kind you can't buy without a salesperson telling you a story about Bergamot Farms. The shower ran. I stood with my hands under the kitchen tap, staring at sap spirals down the drain like string. When she came back out, clean and bright in my old Tulane hoodie, I asked, "Long day?" Which was code for, "I am choosing a gentle entry point." She said, "We did a leadership circle thing after hours," which meant a dozen high performers sat in a ring in a conference room and tried not to make their childhood sound like TED Talks. "We stayed late." Gavin's really good at creating space for people to be honest. "You could have texted," I said, and immediately regretted the smallness of it. "My phone died." We have chargers at home. I heard myself. Petty, defensive, not that man. She breathed in through her nose like she was keeping words from spilling. "I'm tired, Ethan." "I know," I said, because I know how many hours she could work on adrenaline before her body asked for interest. "I'm not trying to audit you. I'm trying to be in your life." Her eyes softened a fraction. Then her Slack pinged on the counter where her dead phone sat charging. We both looked. The preview showed, "Gavin, tomorrow at 7, if we beat finance in, we can steal the whiteboard." A thumbs up bubble under it. "Natalie, deal." Then a lightning bolt emoji. The part of me that still likes people believed it was about a whiteboard. The part of me that knows what happens after midnight knew it wasn't just about a whiteboard. "Who's we?" I asked. "Ethan." She said my name like you say, "sit" when a dog forgets itself. "I'm not mad," I lied. "I'm trying to keep up." She wrapped her arms around my waist and put her face in my chest like she used to when I came home smelling like metallic dust and ozone. "I want you to be proud of me," she said into my shirt. I am. I was. Pride and fear aren't mutually exclusive. They just make a bad cocktail. Do I get to meet him yet? Soon. She said it the way you tell a kid you'll go to the park when the rain stops and you live in Seattle. The offsite was in Oha, because of course it was. They called it a strategic reset, which made me picture executives in athleisure doing trust falls into infinity pools. The week before she left, she bought a new suitcase. It wasn't a cheap one. It was the kind you see in ads with women walking briskly through airports that look like art museums. She laid outfits on the bed like a game of chess. Linen, silk, a blazer the color of wet stone. Flats for the lawn, heels for dinner. She packed a swimsuit and said, "It's not like that," which is the kind of sentence you never say unless you've already said it to yourself in a mirror. "Send me pictures," I said, "of trees, or goats, or Gavin falling into a fountain." Gavin doesn't fall. It was such a small sentence. It wasn't small at all. The first night she was gone, I worked at 12 and came home as the sun pulled itself up behind gray clouds. I set the suitcase she hadn't taken back into the hall closet, and a little AirTag rolled out of the overhead bin where I keep cables. A year earlier, we'd gotten into a habit of losing our keys and our sanity and bought a handful of trackers. I felt the warm, guilty click of a bad idea finding its excuse. I didn't put it in her bag, I put it in her DOP kit because it felt less like espionage and more like what if she loses her bag. I knew the line I was walking. I walked it anyway. The dot on my phone traveled from SeaTac to LAX to an hour north. It landed at a resort with a name that sounded like a yoga pose. Her texts were light and dutiful. Landed. Workshop on value props. Actually useful. Look at this sunset. A photo of hills the color of toast. A glass of white wine in the corner. A cuff of a blazer I'd never seen before. At 11:42 p.m., the dot moved 100 yards, from the lodging building to the spa complex. It sat there for 2 hours and 8 minutes. Maybe there were outdoor pools. Maybe sleepover spa nights are a leadership competency now. The dot went back to the lodging building at 2003. At 2009, she texted, "Long day! Good night!" The next morning, I woke up, looked at our plum tree, and thought about cutting it down. Then I made coffee and went to work because servers don't care if you are inventing new kinds of grief. I didn't ask her about the spa. She didn't volunteer. The dot stayed still that night. The third night, it made the same trip, only a little later, a little longer. When she came home Sunday, she smelled like rosemary and someone else's laundry detergent. She set the suitcase on the bed and pulled out a stack of folded clothes and a little white envelope you get with a turned-down chocolate. A note handwritten in a neat, masculine print, "Proud of you, G." "What's that?" I asked, because sometimes you forget to pretend you didn't see the knife in the fruit basket. She slid the note under the suitcase with 2 fingers. "My cohort wrote notes. Encouragement thing." "Your cohort signs like a man who sells watches to men who already own them." She laughed, which I didn't expect. "That's funny," she said. "Don't be weird." I wanted a fight so bad, I could taste it. I wanted to requite the hours I'd spent watching a dot move on a map with some visible reaction, something I could point to later and say, "See?" I didn't. Instead, I did the inventory of domestic normalcy so many people do when they suspect the person they love is renting another life on the side. I asked if she wanted pasta. I texted my brother a thumbs up when he said the Mariners might not be awful this year. I watched her hang the blazer the color of wet stone in our closet and felt like a museum guard who knows which painting is a forgery but can't do anything until someone asks nicely to see the provenance. If this story were tidy, the next part would be the discovery. It wasn't tidy. It was a slow drip and a mold bloom. A week after Ojai, she started spending Saturdays in the office because it's quiet and I think faster when I can hear my thoughts. She turned her phone face down on the counter by reflex. She adopted a new habit of saying, "I'm not coming home late," which is grammatically honest and emotionally cruel. I counted the dinner plates we were using in a week and realized I had more leftovers than conversations. I had once thought the scariest sound in a house was a sudden crash. It turns out the scariest sound is a silence you can't fill with anything that isn't begging. The proof I got wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a lipstick on a collar or a stranger's earring under the bed. It was a receipt. I was looking for a spare HDMI cable in the junk drawer, which is our home's archaeological site, and found an envelope from the company's travel department with a barcode and the word Rimbersement in bold. I recognized our printer's paper from when she submitted it. A gingerly creased page slid into a manila sleeve so it wouldn't bend, because if there's one thing Natalie can't stand, it's bent corners. The receipt was from a hotel downtown 5 blocks from her office, dated 2 Thursdays ago. 2 drinks, 1 dessert, a room. The line that got me wasn't the room. My stomach had already opened at that. It was the memo field she'd filled out in neat block letters. Late strategy session following partner event. Team rate. Team. I pictured a jersey with Gavin 10 on the back. I put the receipt back exactly as I found it because I wanted to know whether my restraint was worth anything to me. That night I said, "How was your day?" And she said, "I think I broke through on our messaging." And I said, "What's the message?" And she said, "That we're not bridging the gap. We are the bridge." And I said, "You hate bridges. You get vertigo." And she smiled and said, "This one is metaphoric." And neither of us said the word hotel. She let me meet Gavin 2 weeks later. I don't know if she sensed I was reaching the edge of my civilized rope or if he had decided a husband is a stakeholder to charm. We went to a launch party on a Thursday held in an atrium with greenery walls and bartenders who wore vests without irony. Gavin found us the way important men find people they've already triangulated, like his eyes had a magnet in them and we were the paperclip. He looked like he always wore SPF and never sweat, not handsome so much as composed. He stuck out a hand. "You must be Ethan. I've heard only good things about your patience." "Is that part of the mentorship rubric?" I asked. "Grading the husbands?" Natalie elbowed me. Not hard. He laughed like I'd told a joke that proved I could be allowed into the room. "Only the ones we can't poach," he said. He talked to me exactly the right amount. He asked about my job and nodded at the right times when I explained how outages are like heart attacks if your product is a bank. He told me about his weekend hiking near Snoqualmie, not naming a trail, which is how you tell a story about the outdoors when you don't want anyone to ask follow-up questions about mileage. He said, "We." About the company the way some men say we about their golf foursome. When his phone vibrated, he didn't check it, which I filed away as a strategic move. He left us with a touch on Natalie's elbow that would photograph as platonic and feel like a brand. He seems fine, I said, like I was reviewing a restaurant. He's brilliant, she said, like I'd whispered something obscene. He sees where the market is going before the market does. I wanted to say, I know where you're going. I wanted to say, I found the receipt. I wanted to say, we can end this story here if you put the note on the table and tell me the part you've rehearsed in your head. Instead, I said, do you want me to get you a seltzer? And she said, please. And when I came back, she had moved to a different cluster of people where my presence would be a detour instead of the point. The confrontation, when it came, wasn't cinematic. I wish it had been. I wish I could report dramatic lighting and a confession that echoed against tile. It was a Tuesday. She was brushing her teeth. I was folding towels because our dryer eats them unless you fold them hot and fast. I found the reimbursement, I said to the linen closet. She spit, rinsed, tapped her toothbrush against the sink the way she does exactly 3 times. What reimbursement? From the hotel. Silence. The kind you can feel with your skin. She dried her face and turned off the bathroom fan so the room went very quiet. Okay, she said, just that word. Then she leaned her hip against the counter like she was bracing for a wave. If I tell you everything, will you promise not to turn this into a trial? I'm not a judge, I said. I'm the person you live with. She nodded, put both hands on the counter, her rings winking like she'd caught 2 small fish. After Ojai, she said carefully, like each word had a different weight, we started meeting more. It felt easy. She looked at me and then away. He makes me feel like the most prepared person in the room, like I'm not a placeholder, like I'm chosen, I said, because clean words hurt less. She didn't deny it. We stayed after a partner dinner. We talked. We didn't intend to stay. How many times? I asked, because counting is how my brain survives. She closed her eyes like she was seeing numbers behind them. I don't know, she said, and there it was again, that particular cruelty of accuracy. More than once, less than 10. She opened her eyes. This is not a relationship, Ethan. It's an edge. It's a career move? I asked, because if I said affair, it would be real, and I wasn't ready to meet reality on its own terms. She flinched. Don't flatten it. I'm not the one flattening anything, I said, and heard the sharpness in my own voice. You're the one who took our marriage and ran it through a laminator. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to hurt you. Then, almost immediately, the addendum she couldn't help but make, and because I knew you'd make me choose. Would that have been so terrible? I asked. Choosing? I choose you every day, she said, which would have been romantic if it had been true. I come home. I show up. You shower before you hug me, I said softly. She looked at the towels in my hands like maybe I could throw one and it would blot the conversation. We can go to counseling. We can, I said. We can do all the things people do to keep a train from going off a cliff when the tracks are already snapped. I don't want a divorce, she said, and the way she said it made me think of a kid saying, I don't want to go to bed because it's boring, not because sleep is a death you practice. I don't want to be a prop, I said. I don't want to be the person who refills the dog food and pays the gas bill and learns how to winterize our hose bibs while you get to be the version of yourself you like best with someone who only knows you in rooms where the light is flattering. What do you want? She asked, and for the first time she sounded scared. Not of me, of the answer. I want you to stop, I said. I want you to write him a message that says, this is inappropriate and I'm done, and then I want you to CCHR. She laughed. A shocked, small sound. That would end my career. That would keep your career from ending your life, I said. He's your boss's peer. This isn't a romance, it's a compliance training video waiting to happen. She shook her head like she could shake the frame right off my words. It's not like that. How is it? I asked. She said nothing, which said everything. That night, I slept in the office. We called the office because calling it the room with the ugly futon felt like an admission of defeat. I lay there and listened to the house make all its tired sounds, pipes ticking, the refrigerator humming like it was trying not to be noticed. The dog came in once and put her nose against the rustle of the futon cover and then decided I was not the person who could fix the thing that made the house feel weird and went back to Natalie's side of the bed because dogs choose the person who smells like continuity. I dreamed of Ethernet cables braided into ropes. At 4 a.m, my brain tapped me on the shoulder with a terrible idea dressed as righteousness. If she wouldn't stop because I asked her to, maybe she would stop because the system insisted. Men like Gavin lived by the system when it honored them and evaded it when it didn't. I am a network guy. Networks have rules. I know how to follow wires back to switches. I didn't break any laws. I didn't hack anyone. But company guidelines are public, and so are org charts, and so are a lot of people's Instagram habits. I made a spreadsheet because that's what I do when I'm trying not to take an axe to a problem. I listed dates, Ojai, partner dinner, the day she came home at 3 and we pretended there had been a fire drill. I cross-referenced those with conference schedules and a keynote he'd done in Portland, and at dinner someone posted a boomerang of where you could see his watch reflected in the window and the specific art installation behind them that meant they weren't where the caption said. I found an internal policy on relationships that read like it had been written by a lawyer who'd never met two people who wanted the same thing at the same time. I read it 3 times, the words disclosure and power imbalance. Did a little square dance in my head. I didn't forward anything to HR, not yet. I printed the policy and left it under her laptop the way you leave a map on a table for someone you hope will want to go where you're pointing. She found it and slid it back to me without sitting down. Don't, she said. Don't what? Don't make this punitive. Don't turn the place I love into a courtroom because you feel small. I feel small because I've been stood next to for months, I said. It's cheaper than divorce, but it doesn't come with a better soundtrack. She was quiet a long time. Will you come to therapy with me? She asked finally. I'll stop meeting him outside the office. That's not the line, I said. It's the line I can draw today. And here's the part where I wish I were a different man. I said okay. For 2 weeks, we pretended to be a couple who had a problem they could name without using the word blood. She showed me her calendar like a woman showing a customs officer her suitcase. She charged her phone in the kitchen. She came home by 9 except for the night she didn't and texted, sorry, 3 times without punctuation. We went to a therapist and a restored craftsman where the rug was so beautiful I wanted to apologize to it for my shoes. The therapist had kind eyes and the calm of someone who's seen 1,000 little wars and knows almost none of them end with a signing ceremony. She asked good questions. She asked me about the AirTag before I admitted it. Natalie looked like she wanted to throw up. That's controlling, she said, and she wasn't wrong. The therapist looked at me and said gently, what were you trying to protect? I said, I don't know. My time. On the 3rd session, the therapist asked Natalie what Gavin gave her, that I didn't. I braced for cruelty. Natalie stared at her hands and said, barely audible, he thinks I'm brilliant. I think you're brilliant, I said, and heard the desperation I hadn't intended to show. I married you because you're brilliant. You married me because I was good, she said. I became brilliant because I stopped asking permission to be. It wasn't the meanest thing she ever said to me. It was the truest thing I didn't know what to do with. The day the pretending ended was in June, during a heat wave that made the house feel like a convection oven. I came home from a day shift because someone's kid had chickenpox, and I was the guy who could say yes. The air hadn't moved since morning. Her car wasn't in the driveway. On the dining table, there was a glass with a lipstick crescent and a ring of water on the wood. I'd asked her 300 times to use a coaster on. Her laptop was open. I didn't mean to look. I did. A Slack window still on a message, half-typed in the DM with Gavin. The kind of confession you write and delete and write again. I can't do crumbs anymore, it said. She hadn't sent it yet. It sat there like a bird that hit a window and didn't die, just decided to sit very still until the world made sense. The front door opened. She stopped in the entryway like she'd run into an invisible wall. Ethan, she said. Then she saw the screen. Her shoulders dropped like someone had taken a backpack off her. Okay, she said, okay. What is crumbs? I asked, my voice careful, because we were on a precipice. The in-betweens, she said. The not quite. She put her bag down and came closer, slow, like you approach a skittish animal. I was going to send it. And then I told myself to grow up. I'm not 19. Which direction is grow up? I asked. Toward home or toward him? She didn't answer. She sat at the table and put her palms flat on either side of the laptop like she needed to hold the table to keep from floating away. He's moving to New York at the end of the quarter, she said suddenly. He asked me to lead the West Coast team. My laugh sounded like a cough. Congratulations. He said he'd put my name in the room if I wanted it. Her eyes met mine. I want it. Do you want me? I asked. I don't want to break, she said. That's what I know. A car door slammed outside. Through the open window came the wet slap of a neighbor watering her hydrangeas. The house held its breath. Send it, I said, nodding at the unsent message. Whichever direction grow up is, send the thing that ends the in-between. She stared at the cursor. It blinked like a heartbeat. She picked up the laptop. She closed it. I can't. She stood. I need to shower. She walked down the hall. The water started. That sound again, like the world ending and starting at once. I took the laptop. I opened it. The cursor still blinked in the box where truth was about to live. I didn't type anything. I took a screenshot of the half sentence like a tourist, proof that a second existed before a different second did. Then I closed it and put it on the table and went outside. The heat punched me. I sat on the back steps where the shade from our plum tree had finally reached the concrete. The dog flopped next to me with a sigh. I listened to the sprinklers on 3 different houses click and hiss and thought about how water will find any crack you don't seal. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number with a link to a Google album. Team off-site! Candid shots! The first photo was a group at a long table, Natalie mid-laugh, Gavin's hand on the back of her chair. The second was the team by a fire pit. The third was a selfie clearly taken by someone drunk leaning into the shot. Natalie's profile in the background, Gavin's mouth too close to her ear. The fourth was nothing but blackness and a slice of light at the bottom like a door almost closed, and, at the edge of the slice, 2 feet, one in her slingbacks, one in his loafers. You couldn't prove anything with it. There are 1,000 innocent explanations for feet. My stomach knew all the guilty ones. I saved the album. I put my phone face down on the step. The dog licked my knuckles like she could taste the salt there. I thought about what comes next, about policies and screenshots, and the part of me that wanted to salt the earth versus the part that remembered I once wanted to grow basil here. When she came outside, hair wet, face bare, she handed me a towel. You look like you stood in front of a blast furnace. House is hot, I said, which was true in all directions. She sat beside me. Not close enough to touch, not far enough to pretend it wasn't on purpose. I called HR, she said, to ask hypothetically about disclosure. She looked past the fence to the neighbor's lawn where water beaded like glass. They said the rules are there for a reason. Her laugh had no air in it. I'm not stupid, Ethan. I know what this could do. Do you? I asked. Does he? He doesn't plan for failure, she said softly. He plans to be forgiven. The sky went the color of a bruise. A breeze finally moved across the yard and the dog rolled over like the wind had told her a joke. What are you going to do? I asked. I thought I could do both, she said. Be the person who comes home to you and the person who closes deals until midnight in rooms where doors lock. She turned to look at me. You married the version of me that was okay being nice. I don't know how to be that person anymore without feeling like a ghost. I didn't marry nice, I said. I married you. I stood because sitting made me feel like I was half buried, and I don't know how to be the person who waits for you to decide which life is real. I'm not choosing him over you, she said, and it wasn't a lie. It was worse. It was an evasion. Then choose me over him, I said. She didn't answer. The sprinklers stopped. The yard went quiet but for the slow drip of water from leaves. I went inside and did the only thing I could do that felt like control without turning into a cop. I opened my laptop. I made another folder. Provenance, I named it, because if I was going to be a museum guard, I might as well catalog the forgeries and the originals. I put the policy PDF in it, the screenshot of the unsent Slack, the receipt, the Google album, which might as well have been pictures of a chair for all the proof it held. I wrote a document with dates and times, and my memory turned into something you could print and staple, and went as well catalog the forgeries and the over-originals jawed. I told myself I wasn't making a case, I was making a record, so I didn't trick myself into making the story tidier than it was. At midnight, she came into the office. I don't want you to hurt him, she said, and I had to sit on my hands so I didn't throw the mouse through the window. You don't want me to hurt him, I repeated, because echoing is how you keep yourself from yelling. What do you want me to do? I want you to trust me to unwind this, she swallowed. I want you to give me time to build the life I want without burning the one I have. You already lit it, I said. You just don't like the color of the flames. She closed her eyes. Please. I looked at the folder named Provenance. I looked at the woman I married, whose hair I had pulled out of a shower drain more times than I could count, and never loved her less for. I thought about what justice feels like in a room without murals and mission statements. It feels like an empty bed at 2 a.m. It feels like a dog choosing her. It feels like a towel ring hung on the back of a bathroom door, a circle you stare through while someone tells you they want a life, and you wonder when you stopped being part of the definition of the word. 2 weeks, I said. No more crumbs, no more rooms that lock. You tell HR by Friday or I do on Monday. She nodded, fast, like a kid agrees to hand over the scissors if it means they can keep the glue. Okay, she said. Okay. She left the room. I could hear her pick up her phone in the hall. I could hear the pad of her bare feet on our floor that we'd sanded ourselves, all those small circles with the palm sander like you could erase a gouge with patience. I didn't follow. That night I slept in our bed because I was tired of pretending the cot was a choice. She didn't touch me. I didn't ask. At some point before dawn, the sprinklers kicked on again and the hiss made me dream of snakes. When my alarm went off at 5, the house smelled like coffee, a sticky note on the counter in her slanted hand. Therapy at 6 if you can? I moved the note from the coffee pot to my wallet. I kept it there for months, long after there was nobody left to go to therapy with. On Friday, she said she told HR. She said the words fast, like you rip off tape. I disclosed an inappropriate dynamic, she said. They'll do whatever they do. She didn't look like someone who had told the truth. She looked like someone who had rehearsed for this particular performance and knew where to stand on the stage. On Monday, an email arrived in my personal inbox from a no-reply address with a subject line that made my mouth go dry. Ethan, request for statement. In the body, a form letter. As part of a routine review, we are reaching out to request a brief statement regarding any knowledge you may have of interactions between Natalie Redacted, an employee of company, and any members of leadership that could be construed as violating our code of conduct. Routine review. The phrase was so calm it was obscene. They linked to a portal. They gave me a week. I stared at the screen until the dog whined because she thought I'd forgotten what food was for. I thought about forwarding it to Natalie. I thought about deleting it. I thought about writing the whole truth and hitting send with the force of a man pushing a boulder downhill. What I did was close the laptop and go outside and stare at our plum tree and wonder how long the roots went down, how long any of this went down unseen before fruit fell. That night, she came home late and smelled like rain and antiseptic, the way offices smell after the cleaners have gone. I told them, she said. I told the truth. What truth? I asked. That lines were blurry. She took a breath. That! I stopped it. Did you? I asked. She didn't answer. Her phone buzzed. She didn't check it. The light through the window hit her face in a way that made me remember the factory with the Edison bulbs and the Mezcal Z's and the basil plant we killed together. I wanted to lay down my weapons. I wanted to hand over my little folder named Providence and say, here, let's put this in the recycling and pretend the system works if you're kind enough. Then, from the corner of the kitchen, her laptop pinged. The Slack preview said, Gavin, they're asking around. We should align. Align. There it was, the only honest verb in the corporate language. I picked up my phone. I opened the portal. I put my fingers over the keyboard like a man about to play a song he doesn't know he knows. This is Ethan Redacted, I wrote. I'm willing to share what I've seen. I stopped there. I didn't hit send. Not yet. There's a moment between deciding and doing where you can still wreck yourself with mercy. I closed the window. I set the phone face down. I looked at my wife. I don't know how this ends, she said. I do, I said, not because I could see the future, but because I could feel how gravity works. But we can decide whether it ends clean. She nodded. I'll tell him to stop. He already knows, I said. He just thinks he's fireproof. She looked so tired then that I almost asked her to put her head in my lap like she used to when the world got loud. I didn't. There's a partner summit in Napa next week, she said. I'm going because if I don't, it looks like an admission. Or, I said, it looks like a choice. She didn't answer. She went to bed. I stood in the kitchen and looked at 2 coffee mugs in the sink. One had a lipstick ring. One had a chip on the rim where I'd banged it against the faucet 2 winters ago and cursed like a cartoon pirate. I washed them both. I put them on the rack to dry. I went to the office and opened the folder and looked at the screenshots and the receipts and the photo of 2 feet by a door. And I thought about how much evidence counts and how much is just the theater of justice we do for ourselves when we're not ready to admit that our hearts believe what our eyes already know. When I finally went to bed, the house had cooled down to a kind of truce. In that half-sleep before morning, just as the birds started to mutter in the plum tree, a thought landed with the quiet of an axe sunk into soft wood. If the system won't keep men like Gavin from confusing themselves with gravity, maybe I could. Not with a blast, with a nudge. I knew where the weak points were. The part of me that keeps servers honest wanted to keep a human one honest too. 2 weeks, I had said, and now there was one. In 7 days, there would be a summit in Napa, a hotel with white wine and low lights and doors with key cards, and a man who believed in forgiveness as a strategy. I opened my laptop and made a new document, the plan. I don't know why that made me feel less like a villain and more like a guy with a wrench. Maybe because I wasn't planning to scream or set anything on fire. I was going to do what the network taught me, trace the connection, document the fault, file the ticket to the only team that can fix it, and then pull the plug if the noise kept corrupting the signal. I'm not proud of what came next. I'm not ashamed either. There are stories where a man punches another man in a parking lot and everybody claps. This wasn't that story. The violence here would be polite and delivered in a PDF. The bruises would show up on a balance sheet. I closed the plan, not because I didn't want to write it right then, but because the house was finally quiet and my body had the shakes you get when you keep a grip on something too long and suddenly let go. I turned off the light and lay there in the new dark. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. The sun made a clean stripe across our floor. On the counter, a note in Natalie's slanted hand. Dog walked. Therapy tonight. Please come. The dog wagged at me like none of this mattered because breakfast fixes all things. Outside, the plum tree held its fat little grenades. I drank my coffee and imagined them falling in a week, the pulp sweet and the skins staining my hands, and I thought the fruit would have fallen whether I watched it or not. My watching doesn't make it inevitable, it just means I'm there when it hits. I didn't sleep the night before the Napa summit. The hotel sheets smelled like bleach, the walls hummed with air conditioning that never shut off, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together, my wife's hand on his arm, her laughter at one of his jokes. I told myself I wasn't going to go looking for evidence. But evidence had a way of showing up whether you wanted it or not. The Napa Valley Conference Center was all glass walls and polished concrete, like a tech cathedral. People wore their best versions of business, casual, expensive sneakers, jackets with no ties, the occasional ironic t-shirt under a blazer. I walked into the lobby and immediately saw them across the atrium. She was wearing a navy sheath dress I'd never seen before, her hair pulled back sleek, diamond studs in her ears. She looked like the version of herself she always wished she was, polished, untouchable, admired. And he was there, standing too close, smiling like he owned the space between them. I told myself to focus on the sessions, on networking, on making the trip matter for my own career. I lasted until lunch. That's when I saw them slip out a side door while everyone else stood in line for overpriced sandwiches. I followed at a distance, my pulse in my ears. They crossed the courtyard and disappeared into one of the hotel wings. My stomach dropped. It was one thing to imagine, another to see. I went back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed staring at my phone. Do I call her? Do I text him? Do I barge in and make a scene? I thought about every warning my dad ever gave me. Never humiliate yourself over someone who doesn't care if you bleed. I lay down and stared at the ceiling until I heard the door next to mine click open and shut an hour later. Laughter! Her laughter! That night at the banquet, they kept a professional distance. She sat at one table, he at another. But when she got up to accept an award for her team's work, she looked out into the audience and her eyes found his first. Not mine, his. That was the knife that cut deepest, not the secret, not even the sex, but the fact that her triumphs no longer included me. The weeks after Napa were a blur of half-truths and excuses. She claimed she was exhausted from travel, that she needed space to think, that I was imagining things. I stopped asking questions. Instead, I started collecting facts, screenshots of late-night messages, receipts for dinners billed to her corporate card that matched his expense reports, hotel folios with the same dates, the same cities. I built a case file in a private folder labeled Taxes! One night, after she fell asleep, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The message preview showed his name. Can't stop thinking about Napa. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I put the phone down, got up, and went into the living room where I sat in the dark with the dog until dawn. The animal laid her head on my knee like she knew something had cracked. When the confrontation finally came, it wasn't cinematic. No shouting, no throwing glasses, just me at the kitchen counter, her on the other side, the space between us heavier than lead. I know, I said. She froze. Know what? Everything. Him, Napa, the late nights, all of it. Her mouth opened, closed. Then she sighed, like she was tired of carrying a bag she never planned to set down. I didn't mean for it to happen. That's the line everyone uses, I said. You meant enough of it to keep doing it. She rubbed her forehead. He understands me. He sees me. I've seen you for 15 years, I said. I've seen every version of you. The broke college kid, the overworked analyst, the woman who used to fall asleep on the couch with pizza grease on her chin. Don't tell me I don't see you. It's not the same, she whispered. No, I said, it's not, because I didn't throw it away. She didn't fight me when I said the word divorce. She just nodded, eyes glossy, like she'd already played this scene in her head 100 times. The months that followed were the ugliest of my life. lawyers, mediators, splitting furniture into piles like carcasses after a feast. She moved out first into an apartment suspiciously close to the office. I drove past one night and saw his car in the lot. It wasn't a guess anymore, it was geography. At work, whispers started. People noticed their closeness, their new routines. Eventually, HR got involved. He was her superior, after all. The official story was mentorship gone too far. The unofficial story was plastered across Slack channels and happy hours. She was sleeping her way up. He was risking everything for a woman 10 years younger. Both stories were ugly, both true in their own way. He got demoted quietly, shuffled into a side role with no direct reports. She kept her job, but the shine was gone. People stopped inviting her to certain meetings, stopped looping her in on side projects. The corporate world has a way of punishing sins without ever saying the word. For me, the divorce was both ending and beginning. I lost a wife, a partner, a shared history. But I also lost the illusion that loyalty was enough to guarantee loyalty in return. Nights were brutal. I'd come home to silence, cook eggs for dinner, and stare at the TV without hearing it. But slowly, something shifted. I started running in the mornings. I signed up for classes, nothing dramatic, just woodworking at the community center. I built a coffee table with my own hands, something solid and mine. The dog learned to sleep on her own bed instead of curling against the empty side of mine. Still, healing wasn't linear. There were nights I drove past her apartment just to see if his car was there. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't. Either way, it twisted in my chest. There were weekends when I sat on the couch scrolling through old photos, zooming in on her smile, wondering when exactly it had stopped being for me. The legal battle over money dragged on. She wanted half of everything, even the savings account I'd built before we married. My lawyer argued, her lawyer countered. We spent hours in conference rooms with stale coffee and too cold air conditioning, haggling over percentages like merchants in a bazaar. At one point, she tried to argue for alimony despite making nearly as much as me. It's standard, her lawyer said. I laughed out loud. Standard betrayal, standard payout. In the end, she got less than she asked for, but more than I thought she deserved. I walked out of that courthouse lighter, not because of the settlement, but because it was over. A line had been drawn, a chapter closed. Work was its own battlefield. Rumors spread faster than memos. People I barely knew gave me sympathetic looks in the elevator. A few whispered, "Hang in there," as if I were recovering from surgery. Some colleagues avoided me altogether, afraid proximity might draw them into drama. I didn't correct their assumptions, let them think what they wanted. I knew the truth, and more importantly, so did she. One night, a friend from another department took me out for beers. "Man, people are saying she's burned her bridges. You'll be fine." She won't. It wasn't comfort exactly, but it was something. Confirmation that the universe wasn't entirely blind to justice. Months stretched into a year. I saw her less and less, once at the grocery store, once in traffic, once at the gym we used to share before she abandoned it for late nights at the office. Each time she looked thinner, more frayed, like someone trying to wear armor that no longer fit. He was never with her. Rumor had it he'd left the company, pursuing opportunities elsewhere. We both knew what that meant. I didn't gloat. I didn't send screenshots or receipts to her new boss. I didn't need to. The cracks were already there. Career momentum is fragile. Once it falters, it rarely recovers. Healing came in increments. I built furniture, then I built routines. Morning runs, weekend hikes, dinners with friends I'd neglected. I learned how to cook more than eggs. I discovered podcasts that made me laugh out loud in traffic. Life didn't return to what it was. It became something else, something smaller maybe, but sturdier. One evening, I sat on my porch with the dog at my feet, watching the sun slip behind the rooftops. For the first time in months, the air felt light. I realized I hadn't thought about them all day. That was victory enough. They say every story needs a moral. Here's mine. If someone values their career ladder more than your shared home, let them climb alone. Don't hold the rope for them. Don't stand at the bottom hoping they'll pull you up. Build your own foundation instead. Wood, steel, muscle, sweat, something they can't take when they walk away. Because when the applause fades, when the conference lights dim, when the mentor finds a new protege, you'll still be standing, whole, scarred maybe, but standing. And sometimes that's the only victory you need. And that wraps up today's story. I really hope you liked it. Tell me what you think down in the comments, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one.